The sun had already dipped below the tree line when Claire Maddox stepped off the sidewalk and paused in front of the restaurant. Its entrance was glass and brass, glowing with warm light, the kind that promised expensive steaks and quiet conversations. She took a slow breath and adjusted the collar of her jacket. A faded navy windbreaker zipped halfway over a plain cotton shirt. Her jeans were worn, not fashionably distressed, but naturally faded from years of use. The boots on her feet had a dull polish and creased leather, the kind that had walked through more dust than carpet. She didn't check her reflection. She didn't need to. She walked forward with the kind of stillness that came from certainty, not confidence. At 1834, she reached the door. Inside, the scent of roasted garlic and red wine mingled with soft piano notes. Waitstaff glided between tables with practiced ease, voices low, movements polished. The place was quiet, refined, and curated. When the door opened with a soft chime and Claire stepped in, the hostess's smile faltered for a second before resetting. Her eyes flicked down to the boots, the jeans, the lack of makeup. Then came the question, rehearsed and polite. "Do you have a reservation?" Claire gave a simple nod and offered a name. Maddox. The hostess tapped on the screen in front of her, stalling just enough to make it obvious. She didn't ask for spelling. She didn't look long. Then she gave a tight smile and said the table couldn't be located. Without waiting for a response, she added, "We do have a dress code for dining in. Business casual at minimum. It's just policy." From a nearby table, a low chuckle carried over. A group of young officers, clean-shaven and loud in the way people get when they think they've earned the space. One of them leaned slightly toward his buddy and said, "She must have taken a wrong turn out of the VA." His friend snorted, still chewing. "Looks like Grandma's trying to relive prom night." Claire didn't flinch. She didn't look at them. She turned her gaze back to the hostess and asked one question, quiet but clear. "Is General Keene still posted here?" The air thinned by a fraction. The hostess blinked, her smile losing traction. "Sorry, ma'am, but I don't think that's something I can answer." Claire nodded once, slowly, as if filing that away. She turned, the soles of her boots whispering against the tile. As she reached the door, one of the younger waiters muttered under his breath, "Why do they always think they're owed something just because they're old?" His voice wasn't loud, but it was careless, and it reached the officer's table, where another chuckle followed, sharper this time. Outside, the sky had cooled to a deep indigo, the street lamps casting amber pools across the pavement. Claire stood under one of them for a moment. She didn't light a cigarette, didn't make a call, just stood there with her hands in her jacket pockets, still and quiet. The sort of posture that didn't ask for pity and wouldn't accept it anyway. Behind her, the restaurant door opened and closed again. One of the younger soldiers had followed her out. Private First Class Evans, maybe 20, looked nervous. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. They were just, you know." Claire turned to face him. Her eyes weren't angry. They were tired. Just tired. "I don't need an apology." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, scuffed leather wallet. There was no ID badge clipped to it, no rank pins, just a plastic card, yellowed slightly with age. The magnetic strip faded. "Could you do me a favor?" Evans nodded, unsure. "There's a scanner at the Bravo 7 checkpoint." "Right." She handed him the card. "Just run this through the reader. I'll wait here." He hesitated. Something in the way she handed it to him, in the evenness of her voice, made it feel heavier than it should have been. "Ma'am, that's for base personnel only." She gave a small nod. "I know. I also know it'll still read. Just let it beep once. Then come back." Evans nodded, uncertain. but something made him obey. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was curiosity. He crossed the street toward the checkpoint, card in hand. Claire sat down on the bench near the curb, hands folded in her lap. Her back was straight, her chin level. The wind picked up, rustling the hem of her jacket. She didn't shiver. She didn't glance toward the base. She just sat. Inside the restaurant, the hostess cleared away the reservation screen. The officers ordered another round of whiskey. No one spoke about the woman anymore. No one cared. Not yet. Private first class. Daniel Evans held the old ID card between his fingers as if it were something fragile, almost sacred. The plastic was cloudy, worn soft around the edges. No photo. Just a name. A serial number. A clearance stripe that looked like it had been valid during the Cold War. He glanced over his shoulder. Claire Maddox was still sitting on the bench, calm, hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a bus. It was 1842. The street was mostly empty. The air had cooled, but she hadn't moved. Evans jogged across the intersection, crossing into the outer boundary of Fort Liberty. The Bravo 7 checkpoint was about 60 yards away. It was one of the older static control points, manned by 2 junior NCOs and equipped with an ID verification terminal connected to the Defense Entry Access System. Normally it flashed green or red. That was it. Binary access control. It wasn't built for nuance. He approached the guard shack, nodding to Sergeant Mahoney, who stood leaning on the counter with a coffee in one hand. "Hey, Sarge, got a weird one." Mahoney raised an eyebrow, pushing his coffee aside as Evans held up the card. "Some lady gave me this. Said to scan it here. Just once. One beep." Mahoney looked at the card, then back at Evans. "Who is she?" "No idea. Got kicked out of that place on Fremont. Diner crowd was laughing at her. She just asked if Keene was still posted here. Then she handed me this." Mahoney took the card and turned it over once. He made a low, skeptical noise, then slid it into the scanner slot on the terminal. Evans expected nothing to happen. Maybe a red light. Maybe an error. Instead, the screen flickered. Once. Then again. And then everything changed. At 18:44:08, the screen turned black. No error message. No beep. Just full blackout. Then the console rebooted, but not to its standard blue DoD interface. Instead, a hard-coded protocol override loaded from ROM. A black interface appeared with yellow lettering, bold and centered. Authorization. Echo 1. Identity confirmed Maddox. Claire. Protocol. Ignition tier. 0. Evans froze. Mahoney's coffee hit the floor. Neither of them spoke. The system wasn't just verifying access. It was activating something. Something buried. Then the siren tripped, but not the one they were used to. It came from the secondary comms node. A flat tone pulse used only for internal top clearance alerting. A red strobe lit in the upper left corner of the console. At 18:44:22, every secure line inside the checkpoint was automatically cut off. The screen blinked again. A new message flashed. Standby for Shadow Protocol linkup. Classified signal integrity verified. Notify command. Black Phoenix initiated. Mahoney stepped back, face pale. He reached for the radio to alert TOC but stopped when the emergency override channel lit green before he could touch it. The terminal was already transmitting upstream. They weren't in control anymore. Neither of them had clearance for what was happening. Evans swallowed. She said it would beep once. It didn't beep. It rewrote the goddamn rules. At 18:45:11, 2 black SUVs turned hard off Bragg Road into the security lane. No lights, no sirens, but they weren't local. Not MPs either. The lead vehicle stopped short of the checkpoint and 4 figures stepped out, all in unmarked uniforms. No patches, no rank. Just that hard-to-miss air of people who only ever operated inside Tier 1 walls. One of them walked up, showed an encrypted comm tablet, and asked one question: "Where is she?" Evans pointed across the street. "Still on the bench." They didn't nod. They didn't thank him. They just turned back toward the vehicle. One tapped an earpiece. At 1846, the second SUV door opened. A man stepped out wearing a tactical coat, gray crew cut, scar running from his temple to jaw. General Keene. Evans blinked. He'd only seen him once before. Didn't even know he was still on base. Keene didn't speak as he stepped to the edge of the sidewalk and looked across the street. Claire still hadn't moved. At that moment, inside the Joint Operations Command Center, the Tier 1 console received the automatic uplink. A single word populated the top left of the black terminal screen: Shadowbird. Beneath it, last seen 10/12/2008, status deactivated, override accepted, status reinstated. Evans didn't hear any of that. He just watched as the unmarked team crossed the street. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't speak. But their posture said everything. It wasn't an arrest. It was an escort. Claire stood as they approached, nodded once, and walked with them toward the SUV. She didn't look back. At 18:48:09, the base siren switched off, but the air wasn't calm. Mahoney still hadn't moved. Evans sat down on the curb and stared at the scanner. Back at the restaurant, no one had noticed the convoy. The officers were still laughing, sipping neat whiskey and retelling old drills like war stories. They had no idea that the woman they mocked had just flipped the internal security system of the Eastern Command Sector. That she had just reactivated a protocol most of them didn't know existed. And they wouldn't find out. Not until orders started coming in with her call sign stamped on the footer. By 1852, the record of the Bravo 7 scan was no longer visible, not even to base techs. It had routed into a separate comms chain, one used only for operational continuity and black-level commands. Private Evans would never again speak of that moment. He didn't need to. His file had already been flagged for briefing clearance under restricted recall. His silence was no longer optional. It was protocol. Because what just happened wasn't a breach. It was a return. Colonel Harris stood over the operations console in the Joint Command Center, his arms crossed and jaw tight. The alert had come in less than 10 minutes ago, and already the room was sealed off. External comms were down. No one in, no one out. The civilian contractors had been quietly escorted out. What remained was a skeleton crew of senior staff, all cleared for high-side protocols. At 1856, the main screen flickered again. A sequence of hexadecimal code ran vertically, followed by a simple line that made Harris's stomach tighten. Echo 1 authorization confirmed. Maddox. Claire. That name hadn't crossed his eyes in over a decade. He hadn't heard it spoken in briefings since the early Iraq drawdown. And even then, only in passing. Spectre Command. The one unit you never saw on rosters. The one you couldn't even request transfer into. It didn't recruit. It chose. He leaned closer, fingers hovering above the panel. The system wasn't running off current infrastructure. It had forced a rollback into archival firmware, software they hadn't used since 2005. There was no internet, no VPN path. It was all internal fiber, all cold layer verification. That meant it wasn't spoofed. Someone with physical clearance had tripped it, or someone with original command authority. A second message populated at 1858. It was shorter but more alarming. Reinstatement signal detected. Designation: Black Phoenix. Primary directive: activate upon Echo 1 return. His eyes locked onto the name, not the signal, not the alert. Her name. Maddox. She wasn't just a warfighter. She was a ghost. She was the reason they built containment compartments into strategic doctrine. She didn't leave footprints. She left orders that survived 10 years beyond her disappearance. He reached into a side drawer and unlocked a worn leather folder. Inside was a single key, still sealed in tamper-proof plastic. A decade ago, it had been handed to him in a private handover ceremony with the phrase, "You'll know if you ever need it." He had never touched it. Until now. The console's biometric reader blinked green. He inserted the key, The screen rippled, then switched to a DOS-based menu interface. Black text over orange. A single file began expanding. Classified archive operation. Black Phoenix subject. Claire Maddox status. Spectre command. Deactivated. 2008. Reauthorized on signal. The room fell silent as the briefing material unfurled. There were no mission logs, no deployments, no kill records, only one line of description: emergency reactivation agent, highest autonomy, mission independent, do not override. Harris stepped back from the screen. His voice was quiet but certain. Find her. Now. But don't bring her in. He turned to the junior officer behind him. You request permission. You don't issue summons to someone like that, not unless you're ready to justify it in front of a tribunal or a flag-draped coffin. At 1903, across a dozen classified servers, a timestamp updated silently. A digital switch flipped from dormant to active. Claire Maddox was no longer a retired veteran. She was a restored asset, and the systems that remembered her had already resumed their watch. The room was secure, deep inside the command wing under Fort Liberty. No phones, no comms. Just 2 chairs and a metal table lit by a single overhead bulb. At 1917, General Keene stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He didn't salute. Claire Maddox didn't stand. He took the opposite seat, set his cap down, and let a long breath settle between them. It had been 21 years since he'd seen her face in person. Last time, she was giving him orders on a desert airstrip just outside Mosul. She hadn't aged the way most do. Not softer, just quieter. He nodded once. You're real. That's more than most ghosts get. Claire didn't blink. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a sealed folder. Manila. Thick. Not labeled. She slid it across the table. He didn't touch it right away. What is it? He asked. She answered without looking up. A mistake being made again. Different logo. Same ambition. He finally opened the folder. Inside were 10 pages, each stamped classified with ink that hadn't even dried yet. Satellite captures, test logs, a series of procurement orders routed through shell contractors. At the top, one word printed in all caps, Cardinal. Keene's jaw flexed. Cardinal was buried, or so they thought. A weapons systems initiative shelved in 2009 because even the warfighters who built it thought it was unstable. It wasn't just hardware. It was doctrine. It was human augmentation without psychological filters. He closed the folder, his voice low. Who's doing this? Claire leaned back. Doesn't matter yet. What matters is someone gave it oxygen. Quietly. Inside a joint project masking as a DARPA mobility trial. He nodded slowly, absorbing the pieces. You could have sent this through black channels. Why show up? Her voice didn't change, because black channels are where it's hiding. Keene looked her in the eye then. No more ranks between them. Just memory and trust, hanging on a thread. You could have stayed gone. They made sure of it. Her eyes narrowed. Not in anger, but certainty. I didn't come to revisit old ghosts. I came to stop a future mistake. Keene folded the folder, sealing it again. Then he reached under the table, pulled out a secure data stick from a small lead box, and slid it to her. The seal had never been broken. It had her initials on it. They left this for me, he said. Said if you ever came back, I wasn't supposed to question it. Just hand it over. Claire took the stick without ceremony. You were a good lieutenant, she said. You still listen before you speak. That's rare in stars. Keene smiled. Barely. What's the play? She stood slow and deliberate. We don't play. We contain. At 1924, the room was still sealed, but a classified directive had already been triggered through a non-logged port. The order came through an old protocol flag only 3 units in the country were trained to recognize. Claire Maddox wasn't on file, but her authorization was, and it outranked his. The lights in the strategic briefing room dimmed to a low, even glow. It was 20:06. A dozen officers stood in place, lined shoulder to shoulder along the walls, some in dress fatigues, others in rapid deployment gear, Most of them were young. Most had been in that restaurant less than 2 hours ago. And nearly all of them had laughed at the woman now standing in front of the digital map. Claire Maddox didn't pace. She didn't clear her throat. She just stood still, hands behind her back, eyes scanning the terrain overlay projected above the table. Her posture was straight, but not stiff. The kind of stillness that didn't come from trying to impress anyone. It came from knowing what mattered and what didn't. A junior officer, Lieutenant Mason, shifted on his feet. He had been the loudest one at the steakhouse, tossing barbs and jokes about Grandma's night out. Now, he wouldn't lift his eyes past her boots. The silence stretched until Claire finally broke it. The screen in front of them shifted, pulling up a topographical schematic of an unmarked zone in eastern Nevada, bunker complexes, decommissioned since the mid-90s, or so it was claimed. Claire pointed to a black-coated heat signature with the tip of a stylus. This was triggered 3 days ago by an unlogged movement pattern. No call signs, no relay, just weight. 5 tons of it. She tapped once. The screen zoomed in. Someone's walking Cardinal into the daylight again. No one asked what Cardinal was. They didn't have to. The intel summary sent to them en route was enough to tell them it was above anything they'd trained for. Claire moved to the next frame. It showed a subterranean grid, 8 entrances, 4 decoy shafts, 2 active cores. That's what we're dealing with. She turned then, meeting their eyes for the first time. And here's the part you weren't trained for. This wasn't supposed to exist. Cardinal was never official. No records, no chain of command. It was shelved because even the people who built it saw what it could do, or what it would demand. She stepped closer, to the map. I helped shut it down. Now someone's breathing life into a mistake we buried in concrete. The room was dead quiet. A few eyes dropped. Mason rubbed the back of his neck, a pale flush rising. Claire tapped the table once. The screen flickered again. New image. A low-res drone capture of 3 trucks moving under night cover. No plates. Military profile, but stripped identifiers. You think wars are won with medals and doctrine? Sometimes, they're just a matter of who buries the right secrets. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Another officer, Captain Reyes, cleared his throat. Ma'am, were you part of Spectre Claire? Nodded once. That's not the question. The question is why I'm still standing here if I was... That pulled everyone up short. The gravity in the room shifted. These weren't tales from field manuals or after-action reports. This wasn't history. It was someone who had once operated far beyond what their manuals even hinted at. Claire walked around the table, slow but focused. Her boots made no noise on the rubber flooring. She stopped in front of Mason, locking eyes. You judged a woman for her jacket and boots, but rank isn't stitched on your chest. It's earned in the dark, when no one is watching. He looked away. She didn't. Then she faced the group again, backlit by the glowing map behind her. We're not here to revive ghosts. We're here to clean up what they left behind. No one asked who gave her command authority. They didn't have to. Every clearance protocol had approved her without a single override. The system still remembered. And now, so did they. She nodded to Captain Reyes. Assigned 6-man recon. No drones. Boots only. I want 2 outside containment nets on standby. Passive surveillance. I want local civilian traffic rerouted by 0200. She turned to another officer. Lieutenant Rhodes. Your lead comms. If we're dark more than 10 minutes during breach prep, trigger fallback ops. Yes, ma'am, Rhodes said. His voice held no sarcasm now, just precision. And Mason. She looked back at him. You're on satellite sync. Full track and splice of orbital logs from the last 48 hours. If anything bigger than a bird blinked near Sector Echo 9, I want to know. He nodded. Quiet. Yes, ma'am. At 2019, the doors closed behind her. She left without ceremony. No salute. No dismissing gesture. But every single officer in that room stood straighter after she left. They hadn't met a legend. Legends came in books. Claire Maddox had walked into a steakhouse in worn jeans and changed the trajectory of an entire strategic command. Now they followed, because the mission wasn't optional, and neither was she. At 2043, the tactical command suite was cleared and locked down. Screens blinked to life along the steel-paneled walls, maps overlapping one another in layers of satellite imagery, old bunker schematics, and reactivated intel feeds. The air inside was colder now. Not from temperature, from awareness. Claire Maddox stood at the center of the operations platform. No uniform, no insignia, just presence. Her shadow stretched over the mission table where the digital map of the cardinal threat pulsed red across the Nevada desert. She didn't ask permission. She didn't check protocols. She simply nodded to the tech officer near the wall. Deploy the war room overlay. I want full satellite tracks, troop readiness status, and containment breach simulations loaded in 5. No one questioned her tone. It was the same voice she had used when sending men into black zones no one spoke of later. Colonel Harris stepped forward with the activation tablet in hand. Command authorization was on screen. He held it up for her to place her thumbprint. Claire didn't move. I'm not asking for rank, she said. I'm not here to be reinstated. I'm here because no one else sees this coming. She looked at the gathered officers, every one of them now part of her tactical response team. And when it comes, you'll need someone who already did. She pressed her thumb to the screen. At 2046, the system accepted her override. A new field command profile initialized in the command roster. Not temporary, not symbolic, but operational. Effective immediately. Call sign Shadowbird. Status active command. Captain Reyes swallowed, then spoke up. Ma'am, should we log your role as field advisor or assume operational command under JTF? Claire didn't answer right away. Her eyes locked onto the red zone spreading on the map. She traced its edge with a fingertip. This isn't a deployment. It's a containment directive. We're not stopping something from beginning. We're stopping something that already escaped the past. She turned to Reyes, voice steady. Call me what they used to, Shadowbird. The room didn't move for a moment. Then a soft beep from the console confirmed her call sign was now binding. Lieutenant Rhodes updated the header of the battle map. Commanding Officer Shadowbird, Authority Override Level Echo 1. At 2051, Claire stepped closer to the screen, drawing a 3-point overlay around a sector of bunkers listed under decommissioned zones. This is where Cardinal was housed before they tried to rewrite its directive. It was shut down because it became self-predictive. Now, someone's trying to test its algorithm against civilian chaos models. Reyes narrowed his eyes. That would trigger a full-spectrum simulation bleed. Exactly, Claire said. And if they prove it works in one town, they'll scale it. Lieutenant Mason stepped forward. His voice was low but certain. What do we do? Claire's eyes moved across the room. She didn't raise her voice. You listen. You adapt. And you don't hesitate when the order comes. We're not chasing ghosts. We're cleaning up what they left rotting behind. At 2054, the operations suite door sealed behind a second layer of clearance. Claire's team was now isolated from the rest of base command. All feeds routed through their command net. Their window into this mission didn't come with medals. It came with silence, precision, and trust. No one asked why she had the right to lead. They already knew. At 2112, the main doors to tactical command sealed behind her with a muffled thud. Claire Maddox walked out without a word. The rhythm of her steps measured, almost deliberate. The hallway lights dimmed behind her as automated security re-engaged. She didn't turn back. She didn't need to. The corridor emptied into the open-air balcony above the main operations lot. The sky was fully dark now, moon tucked behind heavy clouds, stars smudged by the base's low floodlights. In the distance, the comms array blinked in steady green pulses. Claire paused for a moment, shoulders square, gaze fixed beyond the fence line like she was looking past the horizon. Behind her, in the auxiliary screen room, a terminal beeped once. The satellite feed had linked. No external comms. Just one signal. Clean, encrypted, untraceable. The designation pulsed slowly across the screen. Echo 1 reactivated. Status primary command. Verified. An internal camera caught the confirmation. A timestamp logged silently. Then a second screen lit up, responding to the signal. No map, no directive. Just a sentence auto-filled at the top left corner. Shadowbird active. Operational authority undisputed. Claire remained still as the wind lifted the edge of her jacket. From the shadows near the far wall, a single figure stepped forward. Private First Class. Daniel Evans had been standing there since briefing began, posted for external perimeter but too restless to leave. He didn't approach. He just stood at attention, helmet tucked under one arm, eyes steady. Claire glanced at him. Nothing more. No question. No expectation. Evans cleared his throat. It wasn't a formal tone. It wasn't a report. I saw them laugh at you. I didn't say anything. I should have. Claire nodded once, almost imperceptible. He looked down, then back toward the sky where the comms tower still blinked. She wasn't just someone, he said quietly. She was the reason we're still standing. Claire didn't reply. She didn't smile or acknowledge the words. She just walked forward, toward the outer gate, boots quiet against the pavement. Every step she took felt like it knew the weight it carried. She passed the checkpoint where it all started. The same ID reader still glowing faintly from standby mode. Inside the command center, technicians ran final system checks. Orders would come soon. Briefings would follow. But the moment had already shifted. Something older than rank, heavier than protocol. A presence had returned. She crossed the outer line at 2118 without escort. The gate opened automatically, recognizing a signal embedded in her card no longer stored in any database. No orders were issued. No salute was given. But every soldier on duty turned slightly as she passed, as if pulled by something they didn't yet understand. She disappeared into the dark like she had arrived, quietly, without fanfare. And yet, the entire base moved differently after she left. Because power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it just walks away when the job is done. The morning air in Arlington was still. No wind. No movement. Just the quiet kind of cold that settled into your jacket without warning. Claire stood alone near Section 60, her boots planted firm on the wet grass. She wasn't in uniform. She hadn't worn one in years. But her posture still held the shape of someone who remembered how. The headstone was simple. Granite, weathered at the base, even though the top had been cleaned recently. A single American flag stood to one side, barely rustling. The name etched across the stone read, Sergeant James K. Holloway, KIA, Kandahar, 2006. No ceremony, no flowers, just a small phrase carved beneath the dates they stood so we could sit. Claire didn't speak. She didn't have to. She reached out with one hand, her fingers resting just under that line. The stone felt colder than the air. A silence stretched between her and the past. There were no medals laid on the ground, no folded flags, just memory, and the weight of what hadn't been forgotten. In another time, Holloway had pulled her out from behind a burning Humvee under mortar fire. He hadn't hesitated. He'd lost his life a week later clearing a weapons cache that wasn't even in his sector. Most people didn't know that. No one brought it up in speeches. Claire let her hand fall after a few seconds. Her breath was steady, eyes dry. The grief wasn't sharp anymore. It was worn down, smooth like a river stone. It lived deep, quiet. Behind her, a group of tourists walked through the next section, unaware. Kids laughed. A camera shutter clicked. Life moved on. That was the point. She took one last look, then turned to leave. As she walked down the path toward the main gate, a voiceover filled the silence. Low, steady, reflective. We laugh at uniforms when they fade, when the shoulders sag and the colors wash out, when the medals stop shining and the stories grow quiet. But maybe they were never meant to shine. Maybe they were only meant to shield. And the ones who wore them, maybe they never wanted recognition. only the peace to walk away, knowing the rest of us could sit.